Professor Rosemary Bell Antoine, Pro-Vice Chancellor and Campus Principal, Professor Indar Ramnarayan, Deputy Principal, and other members of the Campus Executive Management Team, the University of the West Indies St Augustine Campus, Professor Rohan Maharaj, Faculty of Medical Sciences, the UWI St Augustine, deans, heads, faculty, staff, and students of the UWI St Augustine Campus, specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. That's wonderful. So I am Professor Sharon Hack, Chair of the Open Lectures Committee here at the UWI St Augustine Campus, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the Professorial Inaugural Lecture featuring Professor Rohan Maharaj from the Faculty of Medical Sciences at the UWI St Augustine Campus. We are extremely pleased and excited to host you this evening on a topic of great relevance to each and every one of us, family and community health. It is often bemoaned that scientists sit in their ivory towers conducting research that seems so far-fetched and not relevant to anyone's daily life. This evening's lecture is going to be a prime example that this couldn't be further from the truth. Not only is it relevant to each and every one of us, but important also locally and regionally as well, the highest of human aspirations to improve the lives of all. The role of the Open Lecture Committee is to advance the university's knowledge transfer agenda via high-quality lectures by exceptional local, regional, and international speakers. These lectures are just one of the platforms that our campus uses to engage the wider national community on issues relevant to local and regional development, impact regional policy making, analysis and evaluation, and stimulate and encourage the pursuit of excellence and scholarship. That's what universities are about, and we will see that this evening. Apart from the distinguished open lecture series, the committee also hosts professorial inaugural lectures to showcase the research of the campus's recently appointed or promoted professors. This evening is just about that. Be sure to follow us, like and subscribe the UWI Facebook at the St. Augustine Facebook page, where you will see information on upcoming events, of which there are several others this semester. At this point, I would like to invite Professor Rosemary Bell Antoine, Pro-Vice Chancellor and Campus Principal of the UWI St Augustine Campus, to deliver opening remarks. And Principal, we note that you have another very important engagement later in the afternoon and would need to leave by 7 p.m. Let us welcome her on the stage.
Good evening, everyone, and a special good evening to our star of the evening, Professor Rohan Maharaj and family. I'm really pleased to be able to welcome all of you to this inaugural professorial lecture of Professor Maharaj, and of course it's a celebration of what is a significant milestone in any academic journey to attain professorship. It's our highest rank for those of you who may not be part of this university. And of course, Professor Maharaj is no stranger to significant milestones throughout his distinguished career, also becoming the first professor of family medicine in the English-speaking Caribbean, and as one of our own, yes. We are very proud to share in that achievement. As an alumnus of St. Augustine, Mona, and Caville, he is a shining example of the best of all campuses. He has also made extraordinary contributions on an international stage as a leader in international health at PAHO and as a principal investigator for Yale at the Transdisciplinary Consortium Center. In addition to his international successes, he has made immense contributions to the local and regional communities. So we are really very honored to have Professor Maharaj speak to us this evening on the topic, Curing Curiosity, 25 years of family and community health research. And he will be taking us on a journey through the evolution of family medicine at our campus and in English-speaking Caribbean. At the UWI, we leverage the power of public lectures like these to catalyze the economic, social, and political progress of the Caribbean society by creating a platform for meaningful discussions, inspiring engagement, and driving positive change. And Professor Maharaj's lecture is so very important because not only does it highlight the importance of medicine in today's world, which with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, antibiotic resistance, and the emergence of new viruses, I'm sure you will realize is very significant. But it also allows us to reflect on the remarkable progress our own university has made. So a little showing off, if you like. As you may know, our university, founded in 1948, with, of course, the Faculty of Medicine, and that faculty, being the first to be established, expanded to other campuses, and his lecture, looking at this journey of 25 years, is part of, perhaps gives us an opportunity, I should say, to also reflect that we just finished our 75th anniversary celebrations. And I think the lecture underscores the truly transformative work that we are accomplishing at our campus. Our family medicine program at the St. Augustine Campus began in 2000 and has produced quite a few specialists to help address the health challenges in our communities and to allow physicians the opportunity to continuously upgrade their knowledge, skills, and abilities. Not only that, but this program has been instrumental in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, producing much-needed family medicine physicians to act as frontline workers, caring for the evolving needs of their patients while offering fact-based guidance and advice. And we all know the challenges that the pandemic posed, and obviously we're still not out of the woods, making Professor Maharaj's work and the entire faculties all the more vital. Apart from his discussion of family health, he will also address mental health in primary care, another very important topic globally. According to PAHO, between 75 to 90% of people with mental, neurological, and substance use conditions do not receive the required treatment. Primary care can make a significant difference in addressing the issue, and I know we all look forward to hearing Professor Maharaj's insights into this matter. Further, we know the pandemic has had a profound impact on mental health, which was already a very significant challenge before the outbreak. So it's very important that we continue to examine this issue deeply and also consider the issue of substance abuse. And I know Professor Maharaj has extensive experience in alcohol use, which he will share with us this evening. He was reminding me that we were at a conference together, we're actually a publishing meeting together. And to give you a sense of how much experience he has, he was involved in completing the National Alcohol Survey of Households in Trinidad and Tobago, performing duties as Alcohol Policy Advisor to the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, and contributing to the WHO's Global Alcohol Policy. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can see that the topics covered this evening are so relevant and crucial to our society. This shows that our university, our campus, is not simply a teaching and learning institution, but much more than that. We have had a tremendous impact on the local and regional society, producing exceptional scholars, such as Professor Maharaj. With our focus on regional development and the work we have done thus far, it is safe to say that our contribution remains unmatched. Yet we stand ready to continue this work and align ourselves with the development of the goals of our nation and region to advance our societies. So I want to invite you to sit back and listen to this presentation, which I know will inspire not only you, but our students and policymakers, and of course, members of the public. As you heard, I do have a competing engagement, but I could not miss the opportunity to come here in person to give my greetings and to welcome and to congratulate one of our new professors. So I will slip away quietly, but I will be listening online. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal, and setting the stage for a wonderful afternoon that we look forward to. At this point, I will now like to invite Professor Hariharan Sitaraman, the Dean of the Faculty of Medical Sciences, to introduce our feature speaker, Professor Rohan Maharaj. Prof, let us welcome him.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. I must say that our campus principal and pro-vice chancellor, I don't know whether she saw what I wrote, so, but it's a good thing to reiterate what Professor Maharaj has achieved, because this is a day for celebration. So it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce Professor Rohan Maharaj to this august audience. At the outset, I wish to say that the professorial position in this University of the West Indies is not time-bound promotion as it exists in many other universities. The candidate has to undergo a thorough scrutiny at multiple layers by external independent assessors, and finally by the senior management team, which will include the pro-vice chancellors, campus principals, the university registrar, and even the vice chancellor. So the candidate is assessed by in very different dimensions. The first one is the scholarly output, as evidenced by original distinguished work evaluated by 3 independent external assessors. And then we assess them with respect to teaching and learning. And the third dimension is contributions to the university as well as the nation and the community. Now, Professor Rohan Maharaj has excelled in all these dimensions. I must say here that, as Professor Antoine said, he is the first professor of family medicine within the UWI campuses, English-speaking Caribbean islands. And I must say that, even though I am an anesthesiologist by specialty, my favorite subject is family medicine, and I've been always, because I was, before I became an anesthesiologist, I was a general practitioner for some 6 years. And I always feel that, we don't have enough family practitioners. And, as a health economist, I can tell you that that is the most unwelcome specialty throughout the world, because it's not remunerative. So to become a professor in family medicine is not an easy task. Okay, so from the scholarly output point of time, I want to just tell what all, after his basic Bachelor of Science at St Augustine, he had MBBS at UWI Muna and also obtained a DM in family medicine at Keville. So he's the real one UWI person with all the campus exposure. And then he went ahead to receive Master of Health Sciences in Family Medicine from the University of Toronto in Canada. He also has a fellowship at the Caribbean College of Family Physicians. And with respect to his research, he successfully obtained many grants for his research activities, close to $3 million TT dollars locally and 1.3 million US dollars from abroad. He has supervised and conducted many research projects in his specialty, and he is currently the principal investigator for an ongoing cohort trial, the Eastern Caribbean Health Outcomes Research Network, which is also funded by the National Institute of Health in USA. His particular area of research, as you all know, is the research interest is in alcoholism and its attendant health and social morbidity. So do not expect a cocktail reception. So Professor Maharaj has 54 original research articles published in his subject in peer-reviewed international journals. He is the primary author of the textbook Primary Healthcare entitled Psychosocial Issues in West Indian Primary Healthcare, and he has written a monograph. He has also contributed to chapters in textbook. He has presented his research papers in a number of regional and international scientific meetings. He is a member of the editorial committee of editorial board of Caribbean Medical Journal. He has reviewed, he is a peer reviewer for scientific manuscripts in many other journals. And he has been a convener of many workshops and seminars, including collaborative meetings between UWI and other regional and international institutions and organizations. With respect to teaching and learning, he was the program coordinator for family medicine at the unit at the UWI, and is in charge of training both undergrads and postgrad students. And if you see the numbers, it's really amazing. He has supervised 22 students to receive their postgraduate doctorate DM program, 14 MSc students, 194 diploma students. So he has been a co-supervisor and advisor for even MPhil PhD students across the campus in the faculty. So the student feedback has always been very positive, and being a long-standing teacher in the very important specialties such as family medicine, he has taught and mentored many doctors who are now practicing in the country and in the region and abroad. So, with respect to the contributions to UWI and the nation, he has been a member of several university committees, Ministry of Health committees, PAHO, etc., and contributed in many areas of curriculum development within UWI and administrative aspects, policy development with respect to ministry. Starting in 2013, he focused his research on alcohol issues in Trinidad and the Caribbean, completing the National Alcohol Survey of Households in Trinidad and Tobago. And since 2015, he has been the alcohol policy advisor to the Healthy Caribbean Coalition. And as a part of this coalition and alcohol issue, Professor Maharaj has collaborated with Sir Trevor Hassel, the president, and Maisha Hutton, the executive director of this particular coalition, in initiating a Caribbean Alcohol Reduction Day, which in 22 is celebrating its 7th year. This occasion is celebrated in November annually. He has also worked with Global Alcohol Policy Alliance in contributing to WHO's Global Alcohol Policy, and presented to CARICOM Ministers of Health and the need to address the harmful effects of alcohol in the Caribbean populations. He is a past member of the PAHO Technical Advisory Group on Alcohol, and his upcoming book is entitled Rum Songs and Other Alcohol Issues in the English-Speaking Caribbean. I'm reminded of Treasure Island, ho, 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 and a bottle of rum. Yeah. So the book represents the majority of the content presented in a 2023 celebration of the Caribbean Alcohol Reduction Day and a conference regarding the harmful use of alcohol in the Caribbean. So there are many, many, many other contributions listed in Professor Maharaj's 54-page CV. I don't want to take your time, my time, and then come in between you and his lecture. So in the interest of time, to listen from the professor himself, I want to state in a nutshell that Professor Maharaj has satisfied all the requirements to hold the sterling academic position of a professor of the University University of the West Indies, and I feel proud to introduce him and recognizing his academic as well as other contributions. I'm proud that your family is here. It's a moment of celebration, and he will highlight all his achievements in today's lecture, so that the common public actually can understand the translational aspect of his research, because when we read his research papers as physicians, we may understand, but the whole idea of this lecture is for him to explain the translational aspects of his scientific research, how it impacts on the public, and so how his academic excellence has been useful and will be useful to the application in this nation, region, and globally. And welcome, Professor Maharaj. I'm so proud to introduce you. Thank you for the opportunity.
I can go now. All this has to be said has been said. Thank you very much, everyone, for those kind words. All protocols observed, and thank you all for coming out today to this professorial lecture. I specifically named it, give it a very challenging name, because I said maybe some people come just because they want to know what the hell it's going to talk about. And I'll leave that part till the end. I'll keep your curiosity curious. So, Professor Antoine, Vice Chancellor and Campus Principal, Professor Sitaraman, Dean of the Faculty of Medical Sciences, colleagues and medical fraternity of UWI and the Faculty of Medical Sciences, my family and friends, patients, graduates of the Family Medicine Program, online regional colleagues and collaborators, thank you for attending today's talk, whether here or virtually. A special thank you to the Open Lectures Committee, Dr. Shirin Haque, and the Marketing and Communication Office for guiding me so kindly and gently through the entire process. I want to thank the university for giving me an education and then giving me employment. It's been both an honor and a privilege to be a faculty member, to have been a student at this campus and all the other campuses around the region. I'm a real Caribbean person. And that's why things, unfortunately, that a lot of our graduates don't experience. I see Patrick here. Patrick has a very similar experience to myself, working through different campuses, having that experience, and we still have a chat where all the Caribbean is on that chat, talking every day about things in the region. And I also want to thank everyone for giving the opportunity to share this lecture. One of the things is that I'm not only a professor, but I'm retiring this year. So this is an opportunity for me to reflect on 25 years of research and contribution to both ourselves locally and regionally. It would be remiss of me if I didn't thank all my darlings first. I've entitled this part Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, because so often we arrive and we do all sorts of things and we forget to appreciate all of those who come before. So I'd like to thank my wife, Primiti, for being here and for all your support over the years, my kids, Priya and Rajiv, our newest member of our family, Akib, my sisters, Divitra, Joanne, and my brother, Richard. My other brother, I know he's online. He has a lecture to give. And in the middle here, you see my mom and my dad, who were all very supportive of our educational endeavors and provided for us to really achieve quite a lot. And I'll just share with you some wedding pictures. We've just had 2 weddings in our family after many years of not having weddings. And if you look down in that left-hand side, you see a little head peeking out. We've just welcomed our first nephew, first grandson, Nathaniel. So today's presentation is going to take a little bit of a lot of those things that you've heard about, and I'll give you a little bit, a tidbit of all of them. At the end, I'll give you a link that if you want to go and read more, you can get access to some of the papers. And for the first little few slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about how family medicine is developed. And again, it's the whole idea of standing on the shoulder of giants. I graduated in 1986, went into practice in 1989, and for the first 5 years, found myself in hot water. I had no idea what I was doing, what I was seeing. What I was taught in medical school did not prepare me for the kinds of cases I was seeing in general practice. And I I was making a living. Patients told me that they liked what I did, but there were the cases that presented that said, where did that come from? What's going on here? That whole idea of what, maybe I can be curious about this, and that's where this talk comes from. The idea of, some people would have said, okay, right, I'll just write a prescription for you and I'll see you back in a week. If you don't get better, well, we'll have to deal with that then. But there's another stage. If you start asking questions, you might try to find some answers. So I joined the General Practitioners Association and found that the presentations that they were doing did not address the questions that I had. They were all very nice guys. I became their vice president of the General Practitioners Association for a couple of years and still felt something's missing. Just at that time, UWI at St Augustine was starting the family medicine program. And there's an exceptional person there who I want to praise, and I don't know if he was able to come today, Dr. Tennyson Sunarine. Tenny is a self-starter, had, I think, the same level of curiosity around general practice, went off by himself, funded himself to do his general practice training in the UK, and came back and was there to start the program in Trinidad. There's a photograph that I couldn't find. Someone called Professor George Georgiev, who was the professor of public health at the unit that we practice in currently within the Faculty of Medical Sciences at St. Augustine. And even our HR, it was before PeopleSoft, and they couldn't find a photograph of this gentleman. He is nowhere on the internet. He hailed from somewhere in Eastern Europe, and we can't find him. So, they say, you're just two people away from finding anybody in the world. So if any of you know Professor Georgiev, please send me a photograph. This is a process in limbo. But George Georgiev was a smart guy. He recognized where we were in terms of where the faculty was, what was going to come within UWI, and arranged for me to go to Toronto. He went to Toronto, sat with the professors, whose pictures you'll see next, and somehow negotiated for me to go and do my master's. Well, he didn't negotiate for me. He negotiated for someone from Trinidad to go to Toronto. And there were a couple options. I was then a part-time lecturer teaching communication skills within the undergraduate curriculum. And everybody else seemed to turn the offer down, and I took it up. And that's how I was introduced to these three people. I always get a bit of a sore throat when I see them, because there was kindness above and beyond the necessary. Walter has unfortunately passed away. He was our external examiner for 6 years. He came down here every summer, left his family in Toronto, had a great time. We would travel through the region because we would go to Barbados, Jamaica, Bahamas, and Trinidad. And we would have dinner every night, and he introduced me to the idea. I was speaking to someone here earlier about Brown Sugar in Barbados, a little restaurant that sells bread pudding. And he introduced us to the idea of bread pudding with rum sauce. I'll talk about alcohol later, so we won't leave. But Helen Batty was a teacher extraordinaire, and Yves really was a French-Canadian with a huge appetite, but at the same time had this ability to ask the right questions and sort of instilled with me the idea of asking the right questions. Walter unfortunately passed away a year ago. I was lucky to see him in 2018 when we visited Queen's University, and he's always a wonderful person, a gentle soul, and amazingly loved in the area of research in family medicine around the world. So they provided me with a lot of training, a lot of opportunity, a lot of skills to come back and make a difference. And so I'm going to tell you now about what happened and how this thing happened and what is family medicine. So specialist training in family practice started in the UK in 1952. In 1970, we started to have this sort of just first steps in the Caribbean. And so we were always 30, 40 years behind what was happening in the rest of the world in terms of both the ability to provide training for people who were interested and the basic research that told us what's really going on. In Jamaica, in Mona, they had started a series of small postgraduate education things in the 1970s. In 1980, they got a grant from the Kellogg's Foundation, which initiated them to have a postgraduate program. But they basically had it at the DM. It's a 4-year program. And so it means a huge sacrifice that people had to go through, and they weren't able to get very many graduates over the years. That program ended in 1991 because of lack of funding. In Cayville, there was a single residency post, and this was an incredible post because you were being paid to be a hospital consultant, doing family medicine work and getting paid through the hospital. Very competitive. And some of the people that you see here turned out to be world leaders. Dr. Naidu in terms of asthma, Dr. Colin Alert in terms of sports medicine, Peter Adams, who has become the first dean who with a family medicine background. So we had some amazing people coming out. And they adopted our diploma structure, which I'll tell you about in 2001. In Nassau, there was one graduate from Mona who went back to Nassau from Mona, and they started to have a bit of training and so on, but never really took off. And in 2005, they adopted the diploma structure. St. Augustine had no formal training programs between 1970 and 2000. There was a one-off, uncredited diploma-type structure that Dr. Sunayan had run, and it wasn't until the IDB told the university, and told the government, that if you want to get money for restructuring your health system, you've got to put in a family medicine or a medical program for primary care physicians. And so it was because somebody externally was twisting the hand of our government that Dr. Sunayan was invited to sort of start developing this program. And just to show you a photograph of what was happening. These were the GPs who in those days would get together in classrooms in schools and sit down and have people come and talk. And these were people who were doing it out of the old goodness of their heart, their desire for themselves to improve. And that organization really led into us to then, in 1999, to sit and have a working of the diploma and start to decide how this money would be spent. And people like Dr. Sunayan, Dr. Sonia Roach, Dr. Winsome Sigri, Dr. Mike Hoyos. Dr. John Fuller was a visitor from the University of London, and he came down to try to help us to sort of decide what we should be teaching. Dr. Pauline Williams-Green was a graduate from Cuba who had joined the program in Mona. Dr. Professor Adams, who I've mentioned, and Dr. Hack, who was one of our lecturers within the unit of public health. And we sat down for a couple days and outlined what this program would look like. The program is built on the principles of family medicine. And the whole idea is that this isn't just a GP, somebody who's finished an MBBS training and goes into practice with no additional training. This is a skilled physician. This is somebody who has gone through and had additional training to the above and beyond what the MBBS would provide. Family medicine is community-based. It's not for hospital doctors. These are for people living and working within a community. Family medicine, the family practitioner, is a resource to the community. What do you mean by that? What is a resource? You know, when you develop a healthcare system within a rural community, what you're doing is taking money from the central government and distributing that money to that community. So that physician becomes a resource, a financial resource, because somebody's paying that person. You now, as a patient, don't have to travel 5 miles, 10 miles, 100 miles to get your service. So that is money being delivered to your community. But also, when someone is faced with a challenge, this family physician is now a resource for you to help you to make your decisions. And most controversial, I think, is that the family medicine, the principle of family medicine, relies on the doctor-patient relationship. And it's not only important, it is central to the role of the family physician. So they almost know, I don't think there's any other discipline within medicine that defines itself according to its relationship with the patient. And that relationship is not only something that's goody and feels nice. It's about the use of that relationship in the therapeutic process, the ability to use that relationship to help people to get better. I have patients who come into me and say to me, "Doc, I only have to see your face and I feel better." And I said, okay, let me put that in a package and I'll sell that on YouTube, or Amazon. But it's that idea that there's something intangible, there's this belief, this trust that this person has in you, that when you give your time and attention to them, that they will feel better. The underlying philosophy is humanist, that looks after the best of all humans, and this thrives best in social democratic states. If you look at where family medicine has done really well, a lot of them are the social democratic states of Northern Europe, and even within Europe, a lot of the English-speaking countries, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. So we have these philosophies, we have this program now that we've done. The first couple modules were all created, and I joined the program in 2000 and were writing the next steps while we were teaching. So it wasn't all finished, it wasn't cast in stone. We were writing what are the objectives of the next modules before, right as we were delivering at the same time. We were able to develop a very strong presence in the undergraduate curriculum. We now have a standardized curriculum for postgraduate training across the region. We have buy-in by all the different countries. Importantly, we have a unified examination process. So we have Professor Rosser coming down every summer to say, this is a good exam. He's looking at the papers saying, okay, you need to make some corrections here. And this is outstanding cooperation and communication between regional faculties. Interestingly, 3 of the people involved in the practice at that time were all from the same class of 1986. So Dr. Peter Adams, who I'll show you in the next picture, Dr. Paula Nunes, who unfortunately has left our faculty and now lives in the UK, and myself, and one of our members of the class that followed us, class of 1987. We also had in the background Dr. Sonia Roach and the advocacy of the regional organization, the Caribbean College of Family Physicians, helping us and saying, look, these are the things that we should be doing to make this program proceed. So I call this slide the changing of the guard because several of these people who I've highlighted here were the teachers of myself when I was in medical school. So on the left here, well, not Sonia, but you have Brendan Brain. Sonia was the representative of the Caribbean College of Family Physicians. You had Mike Hoyos, who was my teacher in Barbados, and Dr. Winsome Sigri, who was my teacher in Jamaica. These were some of the early stalwarts. They were practicing and teaching some of that early 1970 kind of sessions in family medicine. But they had not gone to have a full postgraduate program. These were the people who were now taking over. So Peter Adams in Barbados, Dr. Pauline Green in Jamaica, Dr. Hannah in Bahamas, myself in Trinidad, and Dr. Tomlin Paul from Jamaica. Tomlin was more public health, but he was also a very strong family physician. And we now have had 2 deans from that photograph. So we have Dr. Adams, who became a dean in Jamaica, in Barbados, and Dr. Tomlin Paul, who was a dean of the Faculty of Medical Sciences in Jamaica. So we didn't know it at the time, but at that time we were just starting to get our feet wet in the programs. And between 1980 and 2000, there were 8 or 9 graduates in the entire region. And one was practicing in Barbados, a couple of them practicing in Barbados, some through Jamaica, one in Bahamas. And since starting the diploma program in 2000, since having this sort of very strong undergraduate presence, since having this great cooperation between all the faculty members across the region, this is what we've been able to achieve. We've had over 300 graduates through the region. We have about 80 specialist family physicians. In 2024, 3 months from now, as a university examiner, I'll be examining 75 candidates and 21 specialists. And in St. Augustine currently, we have 48 family medicine students and a past history of 171 graduates. And they're working at all levels. Some of them are county medical officers of health. Some of them are working within the Ministry of Health. And one of the most wonderful experiences I've had is a patient walks into my office one day and says, I haven't seen you for a while because I went to the health center. And the doctor said, "Oh, you go by Dr. Maharaj, I know him." And he said, "Doc, that doctor was just like you. So I don't need to come and see you anymore." I said, "Good, that's all right, that's okay. I will take that as a blessing." So we're starting to see an impact. One of the other stories I've heard is in the Bahamas. Now, I don't know what caused this, but in the Bahamas, the government gives 4 new posts for family medicine every year. And so that means they have 16 family doctors in training at any one time. And they get 4 new graduates every year. And I said to them, well, in casual conversation, why are they doing this? What's happening? They said, well, what happened is they started to send the graduates out to the family islands. Now, Bahamas has a huge number of these small islands out in the periphery. And I said, well, that's great. How are the doctors coping? They said they're doing great. And they said, well, why the government has continued the program is that they don't have to send out the helicopter so often. I say, what do you mean? He says, well, when these family docs were not out there, every day the helicopter had to make trips to go and bring people to the central Nassau. So that they're saving money on helicopter rides and transferring because the family docs out in the community are doing the jobs to keep the patients well. So that's the kind of story of how we've taken discipline to this level now. This was published in this paper where we looked at family medicine at the university as a model for the developing world, and it was accepted for a journal called Education in Primary Care. Because of that collaboration, we have 4 sites, and yet still the sites work as one. And we think that we have something here that's really worked very well. We're very proud of it, and I think many of our graduates. Can I see all of the people here who are graduates today of our program? Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out and saying hello. Thank you very much. We've had a lot of external validation, some very, very, very high and very prominent academics. Professor Roger Jones has written a textbook that's 2 volumes this big on family practice, the Oxford Textbook of Family Medicine. He was my examiner, and he was our external examiner for 3 years. Professor Batty here, you see her in the middle, unfortunately a little bit fuzzy, from at an exam in Bahamas, and Professor Rossa when I visited at Queen's University. This is one of our teams. When we have exams in Jamaica, sometimes this is the number of examiners you have. Quite a large group. And on the right, your left, you'll see Dr. Ruth Wilson, who was our examiner for 6 years from Canada. She was also from Queen's University. And some of the students may see themselves here. We've had wonderful graduates over the years. Thank you all very much for your time. And now there's a new changing of the guard. From that photograph in 2005, in 2019 was the first time that Professor Adams or myself was not part of the examiners team. So it's time for us to slip out through the sides of the stage and allow the young doctors, I see Ravi there, Ravi, you're in that picture, taking over the mantles. Thank you very much for your job, guys. So that's a little bit about how family medicine has developed and my role in it, and I hope that you've enjoyed listening. I think it's an important, instructive thing that when you have local people with interest, you can build something that is quite useful, and I think it will have an impact in the years to come. All right, so I'm a family physician. I've done work in mental health, and I'm also doing work on alcohol. And when I tell people who are academics, they said, well, you really don't like yourself, because nobody has an interest in any of those 3 things. But if it wasn't a challenge, it wouldn't be fun. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the research I've done in mental health. And again, it was after discussions with that group, that family practice group, where we would sit and have discussions. And we get the specialists to come in and do their talks. But unfortunately, it was very hospital-centric medicine. And I started to recognize, look, we needed something different. There was something else that I was seeing that we weren't being able to address properly. And for those of you, I know we all sometimes walk around with a nice, happy face, but we don't feel it. Just remember, we talk about some sad things in the next few minutes. But it was a huge collaboration. The university supported me, collaborators across the region. I'll share with you some of them Of course, my family put up with all kinds of things, and many of our students helped with some of these papers. I'm going to share a few of them just to give you a little taste of what the kind of things that we were realizing when we started to study mental health in the primary care populations. Now, you can't read this, but let me read it out for you. This was an editorial from the West Indian Medical Journal. It says, a Medline trawl of 275 publications on mental health in Caribbean people revealed a paucity of written papers on depression in the region. So this was Professor Hickling, who was really one of the giants of psychiatry in the region, writing an editorial in the West Indian Medical Journal saying, hey, we have over 270 publications on mental health in the region, but very little on depression, and almost nothing on depression in populations other than hospital populations. And so this was the part of the justification for publishing one of the papers that I will share with you later. Mental health in primary care is different. You know, when we think about psychiatric patients, we think about, you know, suicidal and aggressive and split personalities and all those kind of things. But in primary care, it's often much more subtle. It's about the patient who comes in with multiple complaints, and you can't quite put your finger on it. They present, the family physician and the primary care gives them an opportunity to present the physical complaints, but it's really a mental problems occurring. So many times, for example, depression is not that fulminant kind of depression you'll see in a psychiatrist's office. It's much milder. And there's actually a book called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health in Primary Care that's been published by the American Psychological and American Psychiatric Association that describes how this thing presents in a much more subtle way. Very often, one of the commonest things we see are described as adjustment disorders, how people cope with these sort of vagaries of life, the challenges we have on a day-to-day kind of basis, and how sometimes we cope. And it's not always that we cope in a healthy way. So I want to share a few papers with you. And for those of you who don't want to share, you can just watch the art. Right? So the first paper I want to share with you is something called the Zung scale in the management of fatigue. So in primary care, fatigue is a common presenting complaint. People come in and say, Doc, I'm feeling tired. Right? And we've all felt this, right? We felt tired, but tired enough to go to see the primary care physician. And I asked myself one of those questions, how common is fatigue and depression together? So we put our patients under a screening test. We asked them to fill a scale, and we try to measure how many people were having depression who presented with fatigue. And this is what we found, is that if you come in with fatigue, and we did this screening test on you, about a third had no signs of depression. So they may have a real physical problem. They may have anemia or some other medical problem. But roughly a further third were having severe symptoms, suggestive of depression, right? And when you took these patients and you question them a little bit more, this is what you found. Domestic violence, family stress, life stresses, right? Divorce, work stress. And one person had an existential problem. Why am I here? What's the purpose of life? So you start off seeing a patient with fatigue, and when you go a little further, all of this very interesting sort of phenomena are opening up to you. You have to change your skill. Medical school never taught me to be a counselor, never taught me to prescribe some of these kinds of medicines. I had to go and learn these things myself. I had to develop skills in cognitive behavioral therapy, interrelational therapy. These things were the only ways that I can help my patients. Otherwise, I'd refer them all on to psychiatrists, and my daughter wouldn't mind, but that wasn't the case. In community, nobody wants to go to a psychiatrist. They say, Doc, you treat me now. You look after me. Right? So that was one study. That was one of the first ones I did. When I presented that paper, somebody saw me in the audience, and 10 years later recommended me to be the person for the ECHO study, which I'll talk about. I didn't know this person, but the lesson to all of you young doctors out there is when you get an opportunity to present. Somebody will remember you, and you never know. We've been able to make a couple $1 million for the university and for staff and so on. Thank you very much. You're welcome. All right. Next study I just want to present to you. Dr. Antoine, okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please, thank you very much, Princess. The next paper I want to present to you has relevance because so many of our population has chronic disease. The picture there is of a dear colleague of mine, Dr. Ignat Miziru. Many of you may know. He's been our past chief medical officer. At the time, he was working in Southwest, and for the year of mental health, there was a little fund. He said, let's do a study on mental health. And I said, okay, I have the idea what we're going to do. And we decided to look at depression and other factors among patients who are living with diabetes and hypertension and strokes and so on. And what we found, if you have one of those conditions and you attend a health center, about 28% of these patients would have significant depressive symptoms. We use the same scale, but we tested the scale and used a very high cutoff point, so there's much likely chance that this person would have depression. There are many slides that I can show you on this, but there's one slide I want to just focus on, and that was the link between depression and education. And what you see in the red bars is that if you have better education, you have less chance of having depression. So if you're in school, stay in school. If you're not going to school, start to go to school. Because when you have that education, you can have better insight into how to manage your problems. You can read and understand, and there's so much literature out there now that if you are depressed, you can go online and teach yourself cognitive behavioral therapy, right? There are all sorts of other things, the links between pain and depression, the links between someone who presents with multiple complaints and depression, the links, and interestingly, there was no ethnic link. So if whether you're Afro-Trinidadian, Indo-Trinidadian, or mixed, the rates were the same in all three groups. But once you put in things like education, that's where it really matters. So some key points. This is important because if you're diabetic and you have no energy or you're feeling depressed, you're not going to look after yourself. You're not going to look after your diet. You're not going to exercise, right? And so there is evidence that if you treat the depression, you can improve the control of the diabetes because people now have more energy to look after themselves. So this is how that is important, and we've been teaching this to our graduates. Then I did my DM in family medicine, and this was the topic I did, and we found that if you work in a general practice, which is a fee-for-service, and we did fee-for-service is all around the Northwest region, looking at people west of Port of Spain, east of Port of Spain, we found that about 1 in 8 people who come to a general practitioner where there's a fee-for-service as opposed to the health center, that they would have depression. So the signs are not as easy as in the health centers, but we do find that it's present. We looked at the presence of other types of psychiatric disorders within the walk-in clinics, and we found a range of them. People with hypochondriasis, somatoform disorder, other depressive disorders, and small rates with post-traumatic stress disorder. Why is this important? Because if you're in a health center, one of the problems are people coming in again and again and again. Every day they're at the health center. A lot of revisits. If people come, they sit, and you have to end up having a lot of investigations. And people, because of the health system, we have to see the patients, but you don't get a chance, because you're seeing so many, to really investigate the mental health components. So there's a lot of dissatisfaction with care. There's a lot of what we call sort of sliding door, people coming in and out again and again. We also developed some of the information around post-traumatic stress, and we found that about 1 in 5 people coming to the health center had a history of some sort of post-traumatic stress. And what we found are things like death or injury to a loved one, crime, people threatening them with harm. So that at that time, 2011, when this was published, we were seeing a lot of criminal issues in the country, and so this was having an impact on our patients. We looked at abuse and mental disorder and found that many of our patients have had a history of domestic violence in the walk-in centers. So this was all how we were able to develop a curriculum to try to teach our family physicians, listen, this is what's going on there. You need to be prepared. You need to have the look for the subtle kinds of signs that will clue you in that these things are happening. So the implications for this research in the care of patients in terms of the sort of policies that we have, how we structure our clinics, the kinds of consultations you carry out, the kinds of skills that we have to train our family physicians in. And what we've been able to do so far is we've developed some guidelines for the management of depression in the primary care for the region. In the family medicine program, we have a 6-week diploma course on recognizing and managing common problems. We have that collection of readings that we've sort of put together as a resource. And within the Masters of Family Medicine, which is in the postgraduate, the final years of the postgraduate family medicine, the DM year, we don't have the MSc anymore. We offer a semester-long course on giving counseling to patients. So you learn the fundamentals of cognitive and interpersonal therapy. Right? And if any of you want to buy, we have books, not on sale today, but this text is available if you want to read a little bit more about what we've done. Right? I just wanted to share, you've heard something about the ECHON project. So I was in this conference, gave that talk, and 10 years later somebody calls me up and says, you know, so-and-so has recommended you to participate in this project. I thought it was a hoax, you know, some sort of scam. Somebody's going to ask me now to send some money, and, you know, I was looking for the catch. But it turns out this was someone from the U.S. Virgin Islands. She actually has become very well known in the U.S. She was on President Biden's team right after COVID for equity, making sure that there's equity in the delivery of all the services to the American population after the COVID epidemic. And she was the Yale principal investigator, and she's found 4 people within the region, U.S. Virgin Islands, Barbados, Puerto Rico, and Trinidad. And the purpose of this study was to establish a research infrastructure focusing on chronic disease in the region, to develop a sort of cadre of people who will do this work, and hopefully to strengthen the capacity. We've gotten a lot of money. We've had 4 grants. There was first what they call a U24 grant, which was basically the setup of this process. Then there's something called a U54, which transformed it into what we call a transdisciplinary research center. And then we've gotten a 3rd grant from the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute to look at the pediatric risk factors for chronic diseases. These are my colleagues from around the region, Marcela Nunez-Smith from Yale, Cruz Nazario from Puerto Rico, Maxine Nunez from Virgin Islands, Professor Peter Adams from Barbados, and myself. And this is our team. It's a huge endeavor with lots of meetings initially, and now we have meetings twice a month. And this has now been going on for almost 13 years. We've lots of papers, and I'm going to just show you some highlights of it. In the early years, you'll see here someone in green in the middle here. That's Dr. Paula Nunes, my dear friend and colleague from my class, who was for many years a key family physician in Trinidad. And this is us going out in 2014, going out to speak to people in some of the communities in the East-West corridor. We found a little dog who followed us around that day. A lot of fun. And for about 3 years, I had what I call 3 years of living dangerously. Because it was a huge endeavor to start this project up. This money is coming in, and you've got to make sure you spend it right. You can account for it to make sure that you're doing all the right things. Working with external agencies such as the Central Statistical Office, the Ministry of Health, the center in Yale, some of people you knew, and other people calling you up and asking you for this and that, and you really don't know who this person is. And then you had to deal with our university. You know, we like to think of ourselves as a good research university, but it can be really challenging, very daunting, working with the bursary, the registrar's office, legal services, customs services, hiring people who are not university lecturers. It can be daunting. But we got it done. It's now operating. I actually don't have to go in, and I'll show you that person who looks after it for me, really. I just signed the checks now. But in those first few years, it was really very hard work, and it was really challenging. We now have 2,900 people enrolled in 4 countries. And we've finished wave 1. We've now published 13 papers from that first wave, and the best is yet to come. So I'm going to share some quick results for you on what we found. The first thing is that BMI isn't so good. We talk about BMI, but BMI has been well established, and it's hard to change. we've actually developed a new tool called the Anthropometric Grouping Index 11, more sensitive. That's going to take us another 50 years to get going. When we test diabetics, 33% of our population were diabetic and didn't know it. Right? When you don't know you're diabetic, damage is going on, and you're not even aware that this is happening. Study 3, we found that having a GP, having some usual source of care, was the best way to get a mammogram, to get follow-up and screening. Only 50% of our population were getting adequate screening for things like breast cancer. About 23% of our participants had A1Cs over 9. Now that means that when's that happening, this person is having macrovascular damage. The big vessels in their body is getting damaged, is getting blocked. And many people had a large number of other risk factors such as hypertension, high cholesterol, and a 10-year risk of getting a stroke of 10%. So if you follow these people over the next 10 years, 10% of them are going to have some sort of cardiovascular event. I mentioned how we are only in the first phase. The second phase is going to see if that is true. Because we're now 10 years into the program, we're now doing wave 2, and they'll tell us, were those predictions right? Because they'll be able to now say, this is what we call a cohort study. So we're following the same set of people again and again. So we're now doing it for a second time. So this is the kind of work that this project has an opportunity for us to get an idea. People are not eating the fruits and vegetables. We tell people, eat this and eat that, but people they can't afford it. They don't have the resources. So many of the people that we've tested across the region can only manage at most one fruit or vegetable per day. Right? People who have networks around them, that means you have people you can call on, tend to be healthier. And we were able to look at how those networks are formed and who form part of it. So a slightly different type of research to general medical research. And we found that the waist to hip ratio is much better than BMI. Now, we've known this, we've proven it again. This study has told us that what we know is true, and yet still we can't get practitioners to do waist to hip ratios, or very few. So it's something that we need to keep promoting. Weight misperception. Professor Henry Fraser, 30 years ago when I was a medical student in Barbados, published a paper on weight misperception. Weight misperception is when you look at yourself in the mirror, what do you see? Do you see someone who is overweight, underweight, normal weight, or very overweight? And many patients underestimate their risk. And this is something that is continuing to this day. So 30 years later, Dr. Adams have done that study 20 years after Dr. Fraser, and this study now has showing the same thing, that our population has this high misperception of their weight. So patients with weight misperception had an 85% lower chance of accurately predicting what their risk is going to be like. Right? We've also done some other studies looking at diabetes and hypertension, and we've been able to conclude what we call a randomized controlled trial, which is one of the highest forms of research in something called the LIME study. The LIME study stands for Lifestyle Intervention and Metformin Enhancement Study. And this was a study that looked at if we identify people who are just on the border of diabetes and we intervene, can we prevent them from becoming full-blown diabetics? Right? So this is like trying to prevent people from becoming diabetics. This has been done in India, it's been done in the US, it's been done in China. We've now been able to show that in a Caribbean setting, if we apply these kinds of processes in a very patient-centered and patient-driven type of approach, that we can prevent diabetes. The key person here is Kavita Dharamraj, who I don't know if Kavita is here today, but Kavita is one of our graduates, is working in Southwest, works with the Diabetes Association, and she was instrumental in getting this project completed in Southwest. Kavita, if you're listening, congratulations for this really fantastic work, and we're really very proud of this result. Based on these results, we were given a wonderful prize, the Vice Chancellor Award for International Collaboration in 2019, and that's my colleague, Dr. Adams, and myself receiving this prize in Barbados. What's next for ECON? Well, I'm retiring. I don't know what does the university say, Deputy? If I retire, can I still be part of this project? We need to have a chat afterwards. Yeah? You won't pay me, oh dear. But the real trust of ECWAN comes in the next year or two when we start to do the second wave analysis. That's going to tell us if all the things that we see, how many of our elderly patients are still alive. And you follow a community and you see, and what were the risk factors for the death? What did they die from? That's going to be really very useful. There have not been many studies like this. They're very expensive to run because you have to have a staff of people working basically for 10 years. When you think about that, these people have been very generous to us, giving us this opportunity, and I'm thankful to have been part of it. So we're hoping that we can continue this work and see what those results are, because it can help to change a lot of the policies we have in the region. Right. Excuse me a second. Right. So I showed you some of the things. I want to just take a few minutes to just share with you some of the other things I've been involved with and some of the people that have really made my time at the university special. I want to hail out my dear friend, Dr. Sulaiman Juman, who brought me on to be an editor at the Caribbean Medical Journal for about 11 years. And at that time, we were able to create a lot of those articles there. We had quite a successful run of it. And I want to thank him and Ian Ramnarine for allowing us to assist in that process. My dear friend, Paul Tilak Singh, Dr. Brian Coburn, and Dr. David Ramprasad, who worked with me, and we've still basically on the Helen Bhagwan Singh Diabetes Education and Research Prevention Institute. For those of you who may not know, Mrs. Bhagwan Singh gave the university, this organization, quite a tidy sum, and we've used the interest on this to help to promote work in diabetes. We've had several people becoming PhDs and have used it to have education around diabetes and so on. The Healthy Caribbean Coalition, I was mentioned how I'm the advisor. This is Sir Trevor Hassel and Maisha Hutton, who have worked with for close to 12 years now, developing this Caribbean alcohol reduction. I'll show you a little bit more about that. We've also had some big projects, the IADB-funded NCD Regional Public Goods that ran for about 4 years, looking at developing work with chronic disease. And I've also worked with Professor David Piku, Zulaika Ali, and Dan Ramdat on a national HIV lifestyle survey. So there have been lots of other things happening while all of these things are going on, and it really helped to work with people who have long-standing in university, and they've helped me also in my career and developing skills and techniques that have found useful. I'm coming close to the end. I just want to have a few slides I want to show you now on the whole history of alcohol. I got interested in alcohol because one day, just in the time when I was wrapping up some of my work in mental health and feeling, well, maybe I should do something a little different after about 12 years with the university, I was listening to a radio advertisement. My kids, my daughter was maybe 20, and my son was 15, 16. She is now going off into university, and this is advertisement on the radio that says, ladies free before 10. No cost on drinks before 10. You come along, you can drink as much as you want. And I said, but I've just spent a couple $1 million training this young lady to be a good student, and these people out there are telling them, my daughter now, come, we'll shuttle you from St. Augustine down to Port of Spain. You could come and have fun. And I said, what the? And I felt incensed by this. I thought this was inappropriate. And I asked myself, why are we allowing this? What is happening here? And can I do anything about it, right? So that started my journey. I was a little upset about it. And I said, let's see what we can do. And as we started to look at this whole issue, it became obvious that this was not going to be an easy task. I thought mental health was bad. I thought family medicine was bad. This is going to be tough. The issues around the origin of our origins of our society, legislation and enforcement, the fact that government get taxes and excise, that there's globalization forces, that there are human rights issues, and then on top of that, you have all the health issues, public health, risky behavior. So there's this balance between How does the government make sure that it can protect the population, but at the same time get all the money and taxes that they need? So it's always a big issue. Then we have things like national pride, Angostura, Appleton, Demerara from Guyana, wins all these prizes, always looks good. You read the Caribbean Beat magazine, there's always a glossy full-page ad on, Demerara rum. It tastes good, right? And if you follow, I don't know if you can see this. Oh, you can, right. So if you follow down through the Caribbean, for almost every month of the year, there's something going on. You have Old Year's night parties, you have pre-carnival celebration, then you have carnival, then you have great race, then you have Tobago jazz, then you have cricket, then you have post-examination parties, right? And then if you're interested, you could follow the bands of the islands, and every island has a different month, and you could basically enjoy yourself. And then just as you think it's getting better, it starts all over again. And you can go to the rum shop and there's a sign that says any day, any time. Now, I am old enough to remember when on Thursdays rum shops used to close, yeah? And on Sundays you couldn't sell alcohol. So for those of you who remember this was the reason for this is that daily paid workers and weekly paid workers got paid on a Thursday. So that they did this to make sure that the guys would go home and carry some money for the wife and the children. And then we scrapped this. But I think we need to bring it back. It still applies in certain parts of the world. Aboriginal Australia still does this because they have such a huge alcohol issue, right? So I started to think about this thing any day, any time. And then someone said, and they reiterated it again today, and I took this up. I said, maybe I'm stepping outside the bounds of the university. But advocacy and social justice, a campus tradition, academia, a voice for advocacy. I said, right, I catch them. I can do this work and not feel too bad about it. Because it means stepping outside a little bit, stepping on maybe some toes that, that the university doesn't want me to step toes on. But I think it's important that this work be thought about and done. So I started to look at alcohol policy in English-speaking Caribbean and recognize that there are huge gaps in how we handle things like advertisement, labeling, marketing. Other countries are doing things to protect their populations. Some of you may be aware that in Scotland, there's something called a minimum unit pricing. That means that there can be no discounted alcohol. You can't have a happy hour. And you decide you're not going to Scotland. All right, okay. Right? And in 2026, every drink of alcohol served in Ireland will have a warning sign saying that alcohol causes cancer. Right? Every time I say that, the whole room gets quiet. Right? And it's because these are the things that are true about alcohol and have only recently been understood to be true, but because our culture is 300 years old on this thing, it's hard to change. And I'm not getting the sense that our population, our institutions, are educating our population enough about this. Right? And next week, we're going to have a huge celebration. I'm going to be part of it. I'm not going to make any excuses, but are we asking our population to say the right things, to ask the right questions about themselves? And I think that's what that study, we're hoping to publish that soon in a Caribbean Law Journal. We then had the study that we did, 1,800 households around Trinidad and Tobago. And we explored how does alcohol used by this household, how is it impacted? And I'll just show you a few slides. If you have a household member that uses alcohol, compared to a household where no alcohol is being used, there are greater levels of members falling ill, relationship problems within the home, lifestyle-related illnesses, work-related problems, and receiving a traffic ticket, right? So just the fact that one household uses alcohol and the other one doesn't, there's a statistically significant difference in that. We have 400,000 households in Trinidad. 66% of households who use alcohol, a third of them don't. And this is the kind of comparison. You don't see it obviously, but when you start to ask questions, you see other things. If a member of that family is binge drinking or using alcohol in a harmful way, then there's another statistical difference in terms of the things like, again, household members falling sick, lifestyle-related illnesses, relationship problems, and problems with the children, right? So there's a statistically significant difference between households where binge drinking occurs, where no binge drinking occurs. There are lots of other things on this. If you go online, you can find this paper. It's called the NASH study, National Alcohol Study of Households in Trinidad and Tobago. We have had 2 papers and a third paper that I'll just share with you some stuff on it. It's not publishable, but it's interesting to think about it. There's another study we looked at called the critical incidents contributing to substance use. And some of the key things in this diagram is the link of peer pressure, the link of abuse, the link of early life stress, and the link and the relationship between the use of alcohol in the home and accessibility to things like alcohol and drugs. If young people are exposed to it early, there's a greater chance. I'm guilty of this. We've always had alcohol in our house. But are we having that discussion? I never had a discussion. It never occurred to me when I was growing up that this was a problem, and we need to start thinking. And all I'm saying to you is we need to become more aware of it. Another study that we've done is looking at the impact of alcohol on women in Trinidad. And I'll just share with you a quote from one of our interviewers. Alcohol is too prevalent in terms of advertising, in parts of everything. You go to the beach, is alcohol. You go to the river, is alcohol. You walk down the street. The main place of recreation is the bar. It is doing great damage. It is seen as fashionable, portrayed as fashionable. We need to change. It's doing much harm. So this is one interview about, among several, that talks about how alcohol is impacted on women and families in Trinidad. We've also done, as part of our NASH survey, asked people, well, what would you like to have change around alcohol? The first thing that we found is that 87% of households in our country, there's a bar within walking distance. Right? People can walk to a rum shop, right? 87%. When we asked people, do you want to change that? Surprisingly, people didn't say no. Just about half said, we want that to change, and the other half said, we don't really care. But people are prepared for more labeling. They are prepared to have greater display of the harmful effects on the alcohol. They prepare to hold sellers of alcohol responsible, large 80%. They are prepared to allow stricter breathalyzer use and increase fines for drunk driving and increase education on alcohol use. And they prepare to pay more taxes on alcohol. When I saw that, I was, well, people prepare to pay more on this, and that's interesting. And I think that that's part of it. One of the things that came out of this is that people said, when our interviewees went to houses, people said, wow, finally. Yeah, finally. It's like people have suffered so much in this and they want a response. They were happy that somebody came to them and said, let's do something about it. Right? My daughter Priya and they were involved in this study looking at people's perception of advertisements. And one interesting thing is that many of the people that were interviewed didn't think that alcohol advertisements were affecting them. That's how subtle and powerful this thing is. Yet still our alcohol industry spends billions. It is there. It has an impact even though people are not realizing that it's there. As part of one of the economic exercises, Prof. Harry, a pilot exploration of the hidden costs of alcohol harm to households. So we used all the harms that we found in those 2 studies from the NASH study and put a cost to each of the harms. And what we have down here is that if this is true, if the model is even close, the cost of alcohol to households in Trinidad, just from looking at the houses looking after themselves, is $650 million. Right? That's when you look at, looking at the households paying for a doctor, fixing a car if they have a little fender bender, simple things, nothing too fancy, right? I don't know, I'm not a health economist, so I've got to get Harry to really do this study for me. Because nobody's going to look at this, they're going to say that's crap, right? But this is just me one day curing my curiosity, saying, what if I looked at it this way, what could I come up with? And that's what I came up with. So after having done this work, I said, well, what do I do next? So how do I use this? So I went to a conference, I got a whole set of books, and I came back and I Sir Trevor Hassel, who was my teacher of cardiology when I was a student in Barbados, had converted his practice to become a public health figure in the Caribbean as part of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition. He was giving a talk in Trinidad. I called him up, I said, I went to this conference, I have all this literature, let me bring it to you and see what you can do with it. Now, maybe you can find someone to work with this thing. And he offered me to come on as their alcohol advisor. I said, oh, I don't know what that means, but let's see. So we started to do some of the groundwork to say, well, what can we do as an organization? And one of the things was to establish lines of communication with CARICOM and so on. So I was invited in 2014 to give a talk to the ministers of health at Washington at PAHU. And myself and Professor Sandra Reed turned up independent of each other, me for Healthy Caribbean Coalition, she for the Ministry of Health, and gave basically two views of the same problem. And CARICOM wrote some wonderful words. They said, we agree to make the reduction of alcohol-related harm a public health priority in the Caribbean, and we agree to commence the development of a regional, cultural, relevant, comprehensive policy to reduce the harmful use of alcohol. This was 2014, nothing's happened yet. Right? So the next year, the ECON process in Yale invited a group of people from the Caribbean, from the different islands, to come to Yale and said, let's do something on global health leadership. And so, okay, I got a group. Yvonne, there you go. Yvonne was with us. Yvonne, what was your position at the ministry then? Director of Health Promotion. We had Dr. Sunadedi and Dr. Ms. Wati from NADAP. And all three of us went to Yale, sat in a room for about a week, came up with a plan to approach the Ministry of Health, came back, wrote a draft policy and sent it to the ministry. The minister took it to cabinet, and cabinet approved that they will give us money to start this committee to look at creating a national policy on alcohol. 2 months later, governments changed and nothing's happened since. Right? So I've reached to be a professor, but there are lots of things I haven't been able to achieve. I haven't written a great Caribbean novel. I haven't been able to get a national policy on alcohol. And so there's still some things to get done. Right? So I've been an academic and researcher. I've gone to these conferences, presented at the conference. The next step is becoming an activist and advocate. I've started at the top and worked down, it hasn't worked. We're starting from the bottom next rounds. So when I retire, we'll see. We've started the Caribbean Alcohol Reduction Day, which happens now in its 8th year. And last year, we had Alcohol Research Evidence for Action Conference, a one-day conference just around the corner here at the University Inn. We had an entire day of presentations. Many of these papers were presented in full. It's going to be all online eventually, so hopefully we have access to this. And we're hoping to have this publication coming out. I don't know, Dean, if we can have a book launch sometime, maybe have a little talk. Rum songs and other alcohol issues in English-speaking Caribbean. The rum songs comes from one of our groups of students supervised by me, looked at alcohol and its presentation in calypsos and chutney in Trinidad, and analyzed it for content to see how this was presented and what are the implications for this. It's a bit of an interesting. So I'm coming to the end. What is this about curing curiosity? And I looked at my career and I said, how did all these things get done? What happened? Why? And I said, what elements would play when 25 years later I feel maybe I can do this again? I don't know. Where did this spark begin, and how does one maintain interest in an academic path for 25 years? And a lot of it is around the questions like who is being affected, what's the reason, what's next, what's the next outcome, when is this happening, where is this happening, what is it, how are people being affected? So I did some searching on the phrase curiosity killed the cat. It used to be that they used to say care killed the cat when it was first developed, and care being this excessive worry. And then for some reason, nobody can quite explain, at least Wikipedia couldn't, when it became curiosity killed the cat, and that's the more famous expression. For me, it started in reading things like this. And Jeffrey, I don't remember how many of these Tom Swift we read when we were in secondary school. But Biggles, Tom Swift, Famous Five, and Secret Seven. I devoured 100 of these books, and it sort of increased that ability and interest in thinking and dreaming about stuff. And I think that those things are still active today. This academic process has taken me many places, had a lot of fun food, fun travel, and a lot of excitement. Part of the process in terms of thinking about things is looking at what they call the pyramid of research. And I try to make sure that at some point I do one of every study on this pyramid. And it's been a great opportunity looking at the different types of papers we need to be able to do. It's been a learning process and it's kept life interesting. I want to end with two sayings. The first one says, if you can do it by yourself, it's probably not worth doing. And that's because as the world has become more complex, you really need to work in teams. And there's three people I want to highlight. Two of them are my co-lecturers who really been stalwarts and have helped a lot in, first of all, being there now that I can retire and take over the programs that I've worked and developed. Dr. Sastry Mutala, Dr. Ravid Khan. And in the middle here, this very quiet and unassuming lady, Ms. Hyacinth Chow, who has worked with me on several projects. Prof. Tilak Singh was a genius. He found this lady and recognized that this person was the right person we needed. She's worked with us on the IADB project, she's worked with us at DERPI, and she works with me at ECHON. Hyacinth, if you're listening, thank you for all your kind work and your hard work over many years. And Ravid's one of our more recent graduates of the programs, has come on board to work and to take over the undergraduate and is doing a great job. And the last thing I want to leave with you guys is that followership is underrated. A lot of these projects, I wasn't the lead on it, but I worked with people who were interested in having me on. We have this culture, if I'm not in charge, I don't want to be there. That's the worst thing, right? We are now in a multidisciplinary society. We need to work together. And sometimes you need to be a follower first. You learn the ropes, you make the networks. And those networks and those people that I've worked with have been invaluable to me, both in helping to develop some of the research that I've done, in helping to develop and take my career to the point where it is today. So don't be afraid to be a follower. And very often, you become a leader just by being a follower first. So in summary, we've taken you through, how are we doing for time? We finished? We good? Just about. A little bit late. I'm sorry about that, but I hope you've enjoyed it. We've taken you through these phases, and I've given you a little view of how this career has developed. I'm about to retire, but it's been a great run. For those of you, I think they said that this is going to be up on YouTube. If ever you want to read some more of these papers, you can scan this, and it'll take you to a site that has summaries of all of these papers, and you can learn a little bit more about them. All right? So thank you for attending, and a safe journey home. I'll open the floor to any questions now.
Thank you very much, Professor, for an excellent lecture and presentation. And I want to tell you that I am eager to help you devise that national alcohol policy. All right? It's very, very interesting work. We'll be having some questions from you, the audience, now, and Prof will be willing to answer them. So maybe we can have about 15 minutes, 15 of questions. Related to his talk, not if you want to be his patient, right? If you want to be his patient, you'll talk to him after. Any questions? That young man there.
Good night, everybody. I actually do have a question. I just have, a comment to Prof. Maharaj. I am Sanjeev Parasram. I was class of 2005 undergraduate and 2010 for the PG diploma. I just want to say on behalf of thousands of students you've taught and mentored and encouraged, and hundreds of diploma students, I am grateful for what you have done for the country, for the region. You have inspired a lot of us, and just thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev. Nice to see you. Sastri, I didn't see you. The light is right behind you. Sorry. Hi, Sastri. Hi, Maria.
Right. Any more questions, comments? Yeah.
Your ending program is talk about preventing alcohol. In university 10, 15 years ago, they didn't have a bar. And right in the bar, a doctor introduced alcohol. So in your own home ground, a problem was introduced. A doctor, I know the doctor introduced a bar right in the, and it's still continuing. So, you ever think about that?
There's some real challenges. I think, I didn't hear everything that you said.
I said, you're talking about alcohol preventing, right? Prevention. 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have no alcohol bar in the university. Have one now.
That's right. When I was at campus here, it was, I think that bar is closed, if I remember correctly. It has, yes. But there's one right next door as you walk out. So, yeah, I mean, if nothing else, you know, the key thing is that prohibition is not the answer. That is a failed experiment. We've seen what happens in the US when alcohol goes underground. You have all these speakeasies that are developing. That's not the answer. What we want is an adult dialogue between our healthcare providers, our patients, our population, and the government about this thing. You know, it's not to say that we don't know. The research is probably about 15, 20 years old that tells us that alcohol is carcinogenic. But even our cancer society will say to our population, we still leave it up to the individual, right? The cardiovascular research says that small amounts of alcohol is protective against both diabetes and hypertension. But last year, for the first time ever, the World Health Organization had a statement that says no amount of alcohol is safe. And that's because the association with alcohol and cancer is a straight line curve. It's not a J curve. A J curve means that there's a protective element. A straight line curve means as your alcohol goes up, your cancer risk goes up. That's what it means. And for that reason, they've had that statement. Now, the people who are in charge of our institutions and our structures are not making that knowledge to our general population. And there's an economic issue, yes, but every economic analysis that I have read that looked at the economics of alcohol says that the harms of alcohol and the costs of the harms outweigh the benefits of taxation and excise duties, right? So it's an economic argument that doesn't stand to scrutiny. And we need to have that discussion. Don't make sense hiding from it. The research is there, you just have to look. Thank you.
Right, any more questions? Right.
Thank you for your presentation. My name is Sharon Stanley, not a doctor. However, I was very intrigued by your analysis of depression and chronic diseases and other depression and, what is it? I can't even read my own writing. Depression and education and things of that nature, and the need for counseling for family doctors. I have been involved in another consortium in the Columbia University's Mailman's Public School of Health, which deals with climate change and health education. And I was wondering, what is your stance on the preparedness of doctors locally and in the Caribbean for climate change and things such as NCDs and mental health in the Caribbean?
Do we have a week? I mean, about 5 years ago, one of our dear colleagues, Dr. Henry, from Port of Spain, Paula Henry, was taking up this mantle of global health, and specifically environmental and global health, right?
Planetary health, yes.
Right? Planetary health, that's what she calls it. And I looked at it and I said, oh no, I have to change the whole curriculum again.
Right.
It is incredible. I mean, I was at a conference last November, a North American Primary Care Research Group, and they're talking about how do we prepare our family, because this is not something that family docs have done. We have not prepared ourselves, and it's something that we need to start thinking about. How do we prepare ourselves to help people to deal with the issues that come with climate change? And it's very similar. things around, loss of employment, loss of income, loss of resources, and all the mental health things that come along with it, with flooding and all the catastrophes that are occurring. So we need to prepare people, and I don't even know that we are prepared even as individuals ourselves. So it is a real challenge, and yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. And I'd just like to invite the doctors to take a look at the Global Consortium on Climate and Health Education at Columbia University. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, thank you for that question. Any more questions, right? We'll take one up here, and then we have one young man here below, right? We'll take that one up.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, Professor.
Hi. Oh, hi.
I don't know if it could be used in an idea, but with the alcohol program you're working with, have you done anything to link with disabilities, physical disabilities in babies, even in the wider community now, whereby you see a lot of vagrants and all of them, they rarely is alcohol or either mental. Are you doing any study based on that?
So thank you, Marcia, for your question. So that's much what Dr. Sandra Reed has done a lot of that work. Professor Reed has done a lot of work on homelessness and alcohol and drug use, and there's some papers that has been published on those sort of links. There's something called fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, which is one of the things that we're recognizing about alcohol use and the impact on infants and in the womb, in utero, the child in utero. So there is work that's being done globally on this. Unfortunately, we don't have much data. There's been some stuff that's been worked out, not directly but indirectly from PAHO, but not very much. But it is an issue that we are not addressing.
The gentleman in front here had a question. And then the lady on that side, right?
Thank you very much. Prof, with much gratitude, you started your lecture standing on the shoulders of giants, and we are standing in front of a giant in family medicine. So I want to take you from that viewpoint where you stand with all this experience and all that we've heard there. What's your vision? What's your wish for the future of family medicine in the Caribbean? And where do you see, or what would your hope, especially as you mentioned your retirement, for the future of family medicine, particularly in the Caribbean?
Yeah, thank you very much. You'll get marks. He's writing his DM exam, so. So we still have a lot of work to do. I think a wider recognition of the value of primary care physicians and the clinician in the community. I still think that our health system hasn't quite understood the role. We have, because of the epidemiologic change, we've moved from the infectious diseases to the non-communicable diseases. This requires a different approach. And all the evidence suggests so far is that we're not doing a good job in the health centers to a lot of the issues that we're faced with, especially the chronic diseases. And I think there is a role for us to develop consultants in the community who look after the health of individuals and families. We have it in a way that underestimates the kind of impact that we can have. And I would like to see that happening. We do have it happening to some degree in some of the other islands, but because we would build so much on a very strong public health system, I don't think that we have grown as a society to recognize that there's value to excellence in community medical services. And that's something I'd like to see.
Hi, Prof. Just one question for me, Dr. Joanne Paul. Hi, Prof.
Hi.
You see me now? I'm a bit short.
Yes,
so, yeah.
I can see you, Joanne. Yeah.
We've had three aspects of your career so far you've gone through. Which of those three, mental health, NCDs, and alcohol, was the one that caused more curiosity? And the second question, to piggyback from that, after retirement, what question you still think you want to have answered? What one segment that you're still passionate about that you haven't had answered yet, that you want the principal and the dean still to give you some time to answer?
Well, thanks, Joanne. So, for those of you, Joanne's a well-known writer in the newspaper, so she might quote me tomorrow. Anyhow, I still wake up at 3 and 4 in the morning with these questions in my head. I don't know if it's too much coffee or what, but it's still there. And I try to keep a little notebook that I go and write it down, because next time I get a chance to speak to the DM students, it might become a project. So it's an opportunity. I think that right now, the alcohol, because it sort of overlaps with the mental health and overlaps with the kind of changes I want to see happening in our society, I think that's where I'll be spending the next couple of years. I think there's still a lot to be done, and it's been very interesting. I think, so here's the hope. There's been something called the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. For those of you who know about this, it was a landmark convention. A convention under the World Health Organization is a legally binding document. If you as a country sign on to it, you can be held responsible if you don't do what you said you were going to do. So people can technically be taken to court. They're saying that you've signed on to this, but you haven't done it. Some of those conventions include human rights. So if you've signed on to the United Nations human rights, the International Rights of the Child, and the Framework Convention was the first health convention that the world accepted, and that changed how tobacco was handled. My kids have grown up in a world where they've never seen a billboard on the highway. They don't know what Whitco Sportsman of the Year is, right? And the expectation is that we're going to get a Framework Convention on alcohol control, because it's not going to happen at 15 different Caribbean islands, each country. I'm not going to be able to go through there and get each island to change their behavior. That's going to take a whole lifetime. But we're working with international organizations, the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, myself working with the Global Alcohol Policy Alliance, and some other organizations, to try to promote this. So last year, there's something called the Global Alcohol Action Plan, which is the first step towards getting countries to agree that certain changes had to be made. I asked a member of the government to come and talk about that at our recent conference, and they never responded. Because they know if they come and they stand up and they talk, they're going to have to start to answer, well, what are we doing next? And so I don't know if they necessarily want to start to open that bag of worms as yet. And that's fair enough. It's a lot of work, and our health ministry don't often have the human resources to do all this work. And everyone will know, when we did some of the work in another workshop about 2 years before we did the alcohol work, we did the work, we set up, we spent literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then chikungunya came along, and the entire staff had to move from looking at chronic disease to looking at an infectious disease. So when you have these kind of limitations in staff, it puts a lot of challenges. And we need to decide, are we really serious about this stuff? Do we really want to make a difference? And are we really going to be trying to make a difference in the years to come? So lots of things to do still.
Right, maybe 2 more questions. Maybe 1 more question. Right.
Good night, everybody. Thank you. I just wanted to comment on the follow-up on the training for DM. I know that doyens like you are retiring, and we don't have enough people in family medicine to teach. And I didn't say that just to that I like family medicine, because when I did my PhD, I did a cost effectiveness analysis of cardiovascular diseases in Trinidad and Tobago. And I compared my own specialty of critical care medicine versus primary care. And the population health benefits is much, much, much better in primary care. So we are not investing in primary care. We have enough doctors who want to study primary care, but unfortunately the university is constrained with the academic staff to enroll many students in primary care and family medicine. And I feel that it has to improve, because we are looking at the big brother there in USA, and I can tell you that the the whole healthcare system is completely, I don't want to use an adjective, but at least it's fraught with so many issues in universal healthcare access because of the deterioration in primary healthcare, because there's large evidence there that PCPs are underpaid, and not only underpaid, and they lose their jobs, So, and you can see that, in US, per capita health expenditure is $8,500, and for the same population health outcomes in Cuba, per capita health expenditure is only $250. So primary health care is the way to go, but unfortunately, I'm happy that you have trained so many people, and I will request everybody to come to university to train people in primary care. That's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, so he's the dean. Let's make sure he signs the document that says that before he leaves.
We have one final question, I believe, up there.
Good night, everyone. I heard your conversation about the alcohol and family medicine, but I wanted to question, in alcoholism with persons who are mentally or hands or physically talented, does it also stunt them or deprive them of their ingenuity or their creativeness in this wider society, or is just limited to a situation where they won't reach their full potential to come to university or something like that?
So thank you for the question. All of these studies were done in the general population in Trinidad. So it has nothing to do with family medicine. We've come to here and I've talked as a family physician, but I'm talking about as a family physician who's doing work in a population. One of the principles that I stated at the beginning, that the family physician is a resource for a community. If a family physician sees that there's a need for a certain understanding, then his job, under his principles of his discipline, is to try to find answers, and that's the way I worked. But coming back to I didn't hear all the details properly. We're not saying that we want a total cessation. That doesn't happen, and it probably is not the safest thing for us to do. Because alcohol can be very easily created in any kitchen in Trinidad. So once you do that, people now will start to produce it themselves. And with that is fraught with all sorts of problems, things like impurities and poisons and so on. So we have to be very careful what we do and how we do it. And then there's also the link with not only mental health and alcohol. There's something called dual diagnoses, where people are having a mental health issue plus a substance use, and that makes it very complex in terms of treatments and so on. So I don't know if I've answered it. I didn't hear all the details. Maybe we can have a little chat afterwards.
What I was asking is the persons, the patients that are treated with the alcoholism, right? Does it stunt their creativity mentally or the innovation in the wider citizenship as the doctor reviews them?
Right. I don't know the answer to that, because I don't do enough treatment of alcoholic patients. So that I'm not a psychiatrist and I don't deal with individuals who are alcoholic. But we do know that some people with small amounts of alcohol can become more creative. We know that some people with things like marijuana become much more creative. So there is that association, but I'm not an expert in that. I don't even want to try to answer that question.
Right.
Good question. Maybe something I'll talk to Professor Reed about and see, maybe she might have an answer for that.
Thank you for the questions, and thank you, Professor, for answering those questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, Dr. Jerome Tilak Singh. He's a committee member on the Open Lectures Committee from Faculty of Humanities and Education. And Professor Rohan, I don't think you cured my curiosity, You ignited it. I want to know about KFC. We have the highest density in the world and its impact on health. All right, at this time, I would like to call on Professor Indar Ramnarayan, Deputy Principal, to make a presentation. So we would like you back up on the stage. a small token of thank you for the amazing intellectual journey you've taken us on today. Thank you, Professor Rohan Maharaj, for a life of inspiration and well lived, and you've certainly left your mark in the region and all of us. And as we now are wrapping up, none of this would have been possible without the folks working diligently behind the scene at all hours of the day and night, and they're all around you making sure everything is going perfectly. Marketing and communications, thank you all for your support under the expert guidance of Ms. Chanel Glasgow and the support of Ms. Jamila Frank and all of the other persons there. Special thanks also to the staff of Division Facilities Management, staff of the Teaching and Learning Complex, Audio Plus, and Gendex Catering for bringing it all together. You heard me right, Gendex Catering. So we have some small light refreshments for you after, and you can engage the professor, and I can tell there's so many questions still to that you are curious about, that he must cure, right? All right, so folks, and last but not least, you've been an absolutely wonderful and amazing audience, and with that, I thank you all, bid you good night, and in the words of a very famous cartoon icon, that's all, folks. Good night.